Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am so excited about my guest today because we're going to be talking about one of the things that I think causes the most issues, the most angst, the most, sleepless nights, and that's on how in the heck do I actually lead? So please join me in welcoming Sonya Shelton to our program today. Welcome, Sonya. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited about our conversation today.
Perfect. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this.
Great.
So when it comes to navigating the ins and outs of business, Sonya Shelton has seen it all, from startups to Fortune 500 companies. Sonya is the CEO of Executive Leadership Consulting, where she partners with high growth companies to drive both passionate culture and profitable strategy. She's on the Forbes Coaches Council and is the author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, You're an Executive, but Are You a Leader? So again, Sonya, welcome.
Thank you. I love how you say the title of the book. That's perfect.
I know, but are you a leader? Right? Well, I always like to know from my guests how they got to where they are today. And you especially have a fun story. So tell us a little bit more about how it is that you discovered that this is your passion in life.
Yeah. So prior to starting Executive Leadership Consulting, I was the head of internal communications for the Walt Disney Company worldwide.
Wow.
So it was, and I was there at an interesting time.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of my career there, of course, Disney's known for having tremendous culture.
Right.
But I was there at a time when nobody in my position had experienced what I experienced, and nobody in that position will ever experience it again.
Mm-hmm.
We had a member of the Disney family, Roy Disney, leading a shareholder revolt against our CEO,
Right.
Michael Eisner. Right. So imagine I'm the head of internal communications in a company, basically going through a divorce.
Right. The mice are fighting. Oh, no.
Right. Right. And so it was like a lot of pressure on our team to remind people why this is a good company.
Right.
Remind them to stay focused on the work, right? And at the same time, all of this politics going on. And so I would say I was probably at the company during the worst of times as well as the best of times. And it gave me this perspective, one, how I responded as a leader myself.
Okay.
Right. And when I was in that situation, I behaved badly, frankly, to based on what was happening to me, passing that on to my team.
Okay.
They gave me the feedback that was not okay. And it was a wake-up call for me, and we shifted things. But I was like, doesn't matter what's happening in the environment, we can have, our team can be different.
Right.
So that one lesson. And it really gave me a lot of empathy for leaders in that they might know the right thing to do, but it might be their environment that's getting in the way. And how do they separate from that? Right. And they can create their own environment within that environment that can actually shift the broader environment. Right. So that was one thing. And then also looking at what I learned from Disney in the ability to connect culture and business results, and then the impact of what a negative culture and a toxic culture looks like for a company, right? So I really experienced both while I was there. And I saw that the impact of that and the impact of leadership and the impact of culture. I started doing new things at Disney. And I also realized I could have a bigger impact in working for other companies. I could also say things out from being outside the company that I wouldn't be able to say.
Right. You're that unbiased person.
Right. Right. Well, and also, to be able to tell the truth without fear of, well, what's that going to mean for my career if I really say this, right? So that's why I decided to start executive leadership consulting, and Disney was my first client. And I just am really passionate about this blend of bringing strategy and culture together.
Right. And I love this because, of course, the outside world has a view of what the culture at Disney is, right? Because we all know the happiest place on earth, right? I mean, that's just what we hear all the time. And, obviously the image is happy, smiling people who are there to do everything they possibly can to make their guests welcome, all of those things. But, the happiest place on earth, it isn't always happy. As you said, and I think that's probably one of the a big disconnect is you've got your outside view from the world, and then what the heck is really going on inside, and how to really deal with that. And then, as you mentioned, business strategy. And I think so many times we as business leaders think it's one or the other. We can make money or we can be happy people, and of course, that's the farthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that famous Peter Drucker quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I used to believe that, but I actually don't believe it anymore.
Right.
And it's really because I started to see some companies who took culture too far at the expense of the business results.
Right.
And then other companies, of course, like we've seen time and time again, that focus on business strategy first and ignore culture. And think they don't have one, but it doesn't matter whether you work on it or not, you have one. And so but I think most people think, well, if I focus on culture, that's the soft stuff, right? That I can't, that's not going to end up in business results. It's just making people happy, like you said. It actually can, when you work with really focusing on your purpose as a company, that can help both internally and externally, right? So why are we here? What is it that we're trying to do? And what's our purpose in the world, right? You can have people that are really passionate about that internally that will come up with new ideas, new ways of doing things that will create exponential results in your business that you never would have thought of. Right. But if you don't have that, they will just come in and do their job, and they're not really thinking for you, right? And as a leader, to be able to lean into your team to help you think can make a huge difference in how you show up. And then I think what's interesting in the past few years are these younger generations are also making buying decisions based on purpose. So they'll spend more money with a company if they believe in their purpose. Right. And I think that's something new. So that I think the previous generations, of course, purpose is important to all of us as far as where we work, but not necessarily in how we buy. Right.
And we buy for convenience. We buy out of habit. All of those other things. It's like they save turtles. Oh, okay. That's nice. But they get my laundry clean.
Right. So I think companies are going to be forced to focus on this, or they're not going to be in business anymore.
Right. And I think obviously what we've seen in the last couple of years is the Great Resignation. Now I don't know that it's quite as great as they all say, but I think a big part of it is people really did realize I want to work somewhere where I am happy. And we're not going to be happy every day. It's just, that's not realistic, but it is kind of like the happy wife, happy life saying, if you have employees who are happy most of the time, or at least not unhappy. So maybe on this scale, you're going to have everything is just going to work better. And they need to understand, the leadership needs to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and that's why we use purpose instead of engagement. We use passion instead of engagement, because when you think about times in your life that you've had a stressful situation that had a purpose. So for example, it might be when you got married. Weddings are very stressful.
Right.
Right? Moving to a new home. Moving is very stressful. Having a child, very stressful, right? But we have this purpose behind it. So we're so excited about the purpose that we get through the stress easier.
Right.
It's we don't, it's not that it doesn't affect us. Of course it does, but we're so focused on the purpose that we keep going forward. And I think that's what organizations can do with their purpose is create that passion so that it doesn't feel like stress, and it's definitely not burnout, right? Where it's like, okay, we are going through challenging times, but we see this as an opportunity or an obstacle for us to get around, to be able to fulfill our purpose. And we're going to work harder on that rather than just checking out. And I think burnout is a big issue that I'm focused on right now, because it's exponentially growing all around the world, not just in the US, where employees are experiencing increased burnout. And I've looked into, why is that, right? So what's happening? And I found two things. One is that we're in a more uncertain world than we've ever been,
for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we used to do strategy, we used to do 3-year plan, 5-year plan. Not anymore. It's a 1-year plan and a vision, right? Of that's longer term, because things, we don't know what things are going to be happening in 3 years.
COVID taught us that, right?
Exactly. So that's one thing, is this uncertainty of the future, which makes people feel unsettled. And then we have this speed of change, technology moving forward so fast, and things
Can
changing.
you say AI?
Right, exactly. That's moving forward so fast. And you know how when you get stressed in your body, all of the energy goes to your limbs, your arms and legs.
Right.
And I see organizations doing the same thing, right? When they are feeling this uncertainty and this change, they're very busy, but they're not really.
We're going to justify our existence.
So there's a lot of activity, but not a lot of thinking going on, right? And focus on what are we trying to do here. So I think that's one aspect of burnout. And then I think it's also because things are moving so fast. It's almost like people are on a treadmill with no destination. They're just running really fast.
Right.
And when we feel like we're not going anywhere, feels futile. Right. So that creates burnout too. So I think it's also important to remember, even if it's small wins, to pause along the way and say, look what we've done. Look at what we're accomplishing. And so that people feel like, oh, what I do matters, and I'm actually contributing, right? And part of what I'm doing is bringing meaning, right? And I think you were talking about, what COVID did with the Great Resignation. I think that was a big part of it, is that people started to question the meaning behind what they were doing. And does this matter to me? And if it doesn't, why am I here?
Right. And it's interesting, just on the radio this morning, they were talking in the business part of the program that I was listening to. They were saying that, it appears that more companies are going to be able to give bonuses this year. But then they said, but here's the thing. Companies that can't do bonuses, and obviously many companies can't, are figuring out other ways to show their employees how much they're valued. So maybe it's an extra day off. Maybe it's they get to work from home, or they get to continue working from home, all of those things. So they really are thinking about, what can we do to keep them? Because, we all know that if we have to replace an employee, it's very expensive, and obviously it depends on what level they are, but it is much easier to keep an employee than to replace them, unless, obviously there are times where we're showing them the door. We're hoping it doesn't hit them on the way out. But yeah, when you've got a good employee, you really want to do everything you can to keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes companies will make changes thinking that they'll get the people that they don't want to keep will sort of exit on the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
It
actually the
never
opposite.
works that way, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and or more importantly, they think, okay, we think this is important, and the employees go, yeah. And I think in many cases, money is one of those things. Yes, we all want more money, more salaries, but we like those perks and those benefits. And sometimes, those are pretty easy to do, but they make a bigger difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying, if somebody doesn't feel valued,
Mm-hmm.
the money isn't going
Right.
to, it's going to fall flat at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's part of why I'm passionate about what I do,
Mm-hmm.
is because I saw this connection between what we do for a living,
Mm-hmm.
that most of our day, right? We're there
Right.
the majority of our day.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're not fulfilled
Mm-hmm.
and we're unhappy, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
that then translates to how we show up when we get home.
Right. We kick the
And
dog. We
then,
yell at the kids.
right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And then that impacts that group of
Mm-hmm.
people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that also impacts the communities we live in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it really has a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
When one person is unhappy or
Mm-hmm.
unfulfilled in their job, it impacts so many other
Mm-hmm.
people, and they don't even realize it.
Right.
But when they are fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
it also impacts so many other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think the things that you're talking about, that you heard on the news, right, about companies looking at what else can we do
Mm-hmm.
besides bonuses?
Mm-hmm.
Does it make a difference to get that,
Mm-hmm.
give them that extra day
Right.
they can spend with their family, right? So and framing it that way
Mm-hmm.
of what can they do with it? What's the meaning
Mm-hmm.
behind it?
Right.
Is not, it also shifts, so you're
Mm-hmm.
doing the same exact thing,
Mm-hmm.
but how you talk about it can also make a difference.
Right. And I love that you did internal communications for Disney. I did internal communications for a very large organization. When I was there, they were the seventh largest company in the world, and it was so interesting because we were doing the same thing. We were going through a whole bunch of issues, problems, growth. I mean, anything and everything. And of course, the most important thing when we're going through things like that is communication. And and you talk about this in your book, and I love it. It's, again, your book is You're an Executive, but Are You a Leader? We tend to think, oh, we're not going to tell them what's going on, and heaven forbid that we have to tell them we don't know, because then they're going to think there's something wrong. Well, many times we don't know, but if you are able to say, you know what, we don't know, but we're figuring it out, because the whole thing with, if you don't tell, then they make it up. I mean, I was always so amused, challenged, all those various things when we wouldn't give information to hear what the grapevine came up with, because the grapevine always made it worse than it actually was. And so I think that's kind of one of the big things, is people just want information, even if it's not good information. We just want to know, just tell us and then we'll deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell my clients often, that doesn't matter how big your team is.
Right.
You could have a team of one, you could have a team of 100,000. Doesn't matter. Whatever size of your team, that is your paparazzi. And they are watching everything that you do to see if it's in alignment with what you say. Right. And so exactly what you're saying, if saying that you don't know is better than holding it back, because they're gonna believe that you know everything,
right,
and that you're hiding it when you don't know. You don't know. Like, I hear employees say, oh, well, they have it all figured out, they're just not telling us, and there's some kind of conspiracy theory that happens, right. And it's better to say, you know what, this is what we're working on. We don't know, we don't have all the answers yet. Here's what I think we'll know. And we'll tell you along the way, we'll give you updates along the way, is going to bring some of that paparazzi noise down, because people have the information. They know what you know, they know what you don't know, and they know when you'll know, right? And makes a huge difference, especially when you're going through a lot of change. it's important because that's when people get really uncomfortable, right? And then they start amping up that paparazzi noise even more when it's in times of change.
Right. And then the worst thing is if you say one thing and then it actually was something else. Biggies like, we're not going to have any layoffs, right? And then pretty soon we're laying off half the workforce or 1%. I mean, and so that's why it's so important to actually be accurate with what you're saying, and so it's, so that it very well might be that the statement is, right now, we're not planning any layoffs, but we don't know what the future holds. And then people are like, okay, the worst thing is when they feel like you lied to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've worked with organizations going through that process and it's not easy. Right. And I think sometimes employees don't realize how hard it is for the leaders to go through that process. It is tremendously painful for them as well. But I always remind them, right, when we're going through the process, as long as we make people feel respected through the process,
right,
so that they may not like the outcome, but they feel like they were treated like a human being and they were treated with respect, and almost like you would a customer, right, or a consumer, to say, we want them to leave, recommend this place is a good place to work, even though they were laid off, right? So, or potentially might come back in the future, right? You never know. So to be able to treat them in a way that they feel respected through the process is huge.
Right. Well, and it's every person at every level. I think so many times we think, oh, they don't care about the workers. It's only the senior management, their friends, that they care about. And in many cases that is unfortunately true. But it really is important to get down there and ask people, what do you think? What's going on? And you talk about this in your book, is, they need to know that, and we kind of talked about this at the start, if they give their opinion and their thoughts, they need to know that it's safe. If they say, oh my God, Sonya, you have screwed up and you have screwed up bad, then, they need to know that they can say that and not, the next words out of your mouth are, you're fired. And I think that's, the whole trust thing is very difficult. And I think we clearly saw that a lot during COVID, when everybody, and still when we're not face to face, we can put on a pretty good front on Zoom and, all of these things, but, it's much harder when we're not in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen a lot of companies recognize that and insist people return to work, come back into the office.
Right. At least part-time.
Yeah. And I think, executive leadership consulting has always been virtual since I started the company in 2007. We've always been a virtual team. Because most of the time we're with our clients, even when before things went remote, we were in their offices.
Yeah, there was no reason to have an office.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that part that's missing is that when we're working virtually, we're working remotely, we don't take that moment to check in.
Right.
So when you're in an office, you come in the morning and you say hello and you're getting some coffee and how are you doing? How was your weekend? Right. Those kinds of things. When we come online, it's like we lose that. So we just like, hey, we're starting.
Yep.
And I think it's important to bring those things into the meeting when you're working with a virtual team, right? So my team, we work on chat, right? So first thing in the morning, everyone's sending memes to each other and saying good morning and checking in, and that's how we start every meeting. Is how are you doing? Checking in, right? And if I think that's where people can get isolated working virtually, so they don't have that connection time. That also means you have to make time for it, just like you would, if you're coming into a conference room, the first 5 minutes, everybody's gathering, right? Saying hello, right? And to be able to make that time when you're working virtually too, can make it a very successful culture that's working remote, but you have to do it differently.
Right. And you talk in your book about having that little personal connection. And I think that's where so many leaders, or I shouldn't say that, managers because this whole thing is, are they a leader or are they a manager or an owner? And what we want them to do is be all of those things. But, so many times they think, well, it's not professional to know to ask those questions or to share that information. And I think that is one of the challenges. I mean, we're not saying tell everything, but it is, oh, hey, I see you've got a new picture of your kids on your desk, or, do you have a good weekend? I mean, just things like that, because then we know that person cares. Of course, the worst thing is if they say, hey, Sonya, how was your weekend? And then before you even open your mouth, I'm on to something else, right? You talked in your book about how the one person had, when they were in meetings, everybody was on their phones and on their laptops, paying absolutely no attention to the person who was speaking. And then all that did was make them have to repeat a good portion of what was going on. But yeah, give back to that word respect. If you ask them, how are you doing? Then, respect that you need to listen to that answer. Now, you might have to cut them off. I mean, if they're going to give you every detail, but it is, and I found that was one of the biggest challenges that I found when I got promoted, because I had been the coworker, so knew everything, right? We all interacted, we ate together, and then I was the boss. And so how do you draw that line? And I think that is one of the challenges that people have. So talk to us a little bit more about that. How do you have those boundaries, but still show that you care?
Yeah, I think it is just, how would you connect with somebody at a networking event, right? Or in an association that you're in. I think that's, people tend to let their guard down with their peers, right? They're not telling them all the sort of details of their life, right? But they're connecting with them. They know what their interests are outside of work, right? They know what their favorite sports team is. They know what hobbies they have. And one of the things that we do, we have a program called Starting Strong for new executives, and I'll recommend that they, especially when they're new, but to continue doing it maybe less frequently, is to do walkarounds, right? And so virtually it might be just a check-in, like let's have a coffee or something like that, and just asking, so what are you working on? And letting them tell you what they're working on. Get so much information about what's really happening levels below you doing this. But it also connects, like, oh, you care about what I'm working on, right? And you want to hear what I'm doing. So even if you feel like, oh, I don't feel like I'm safe enough, or I don't feel like I want to be vulnerable enough to have a personal conversation, you can connect with somebody one-on-one personally about work, on what they're working on, and why what they like about it, what challenges are they having, what's interesting about it, right? That's all connecting with them personally as well.
Right. And sometimes it's simple things. When I worked for that big company, my CEO, I get the call, right? You got to love it now I like my CEO. We got along very well, but he said, I've got something I want to run past you. Okay. So I go up to the ivory tower, because of course I was many levels down below. He was way up on the top level, right? So I go up in there, and the company, we had to use a badge to get in, right? And to make the elevator work. Now, once you were up, you were pretty much good, but yeah, you had to have your badge to get in. And he said, I want to have every badge redone. Okay. And I said, oh, sure. And he said, I want to be able to be 6 feet away from somebody and be able to read their first name. And and we did have to have our badges on our bodies at all points in time. And so most people, of course, just wore them clipped to their collar or something like that. So you could be like making eye contact and be looking at their badge. But he said, I want to be able to call them by their first name. And I remember thinking, right? It was just, to me, that was one of the silliest things. It made such a huge difference. He'd get in the elevator, he'd call him by name. He'd, in the hall, he'd say, hi, Bob, how you doing? And the reaction from employees, because as we know, we all love hearing our own name. And so it was interesting, because it was like, okay, now would I have Deb or would I have Deborah? And so we let people put the name that they wanted on there. Now it couldn't be, like Bambi, if and some wonkadoodle name, but if you weren't, if you were Bill, Will, William, things like that, you could do that. But it made such a huge difference just for him to be able to call people by their first name. And the funny thing was, nobody knew. They all went, "Oh my gosh, he knows my name."
Wow, that's amazing. I love that story. Yeah, so even something small that can make that connection
Right.
can make a huge difference in the culture. Absolutely.
Right. And we do see that, when somebody calls us by name, say a networking event or any of those things, that's why we wear name tags, right? And so, when you see somebody's, name, call them by name. And I'm one of those people, I'm horrible with names. So I love it when people have name tags on, because then I can pretend that I know who they are. But, but that's why it's important when you're attending things to have your name tag on, because we like to think we're very memorable, but we're not always. So, give somebody a little bit of an assistance and let them know. It's funny. I have my husband knows that if, we're meeting somebody, and if I don't immediately say, Sonya, this is my husband, Tom, that means I've forgotten your name. And so then he'll introduce himself, and then usually they will say their name back. But yeah, it's just, again, that's one of those little things that makes such a difference.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be know everything about their life story or your life, or they know everything about your life story. It could be little ways of how do you connect with people? And we all know how to do it.
Right.
But we get into this leadership position and like lose ourselves.
We have to be aloof. We have to be professional, right?
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, I think this idea of being buttoned up as a leader, it doesn't work anymore. People don't connect with you. People want that connection. They want that vulnerability. They want to see who you are. And that doesn't necessarily mean like sharing all your personal information, but just your values, like what's important to you. One of the things that we do with clients is we do a why connection. So we help them figure out what drives them or their why, and then how they bring that why to life, or how they internally process information, and then ultimately what others can then expect from them. And it's a very fast tool that we use with them, and then we help them build a branding statement. And just that information changes the conversation with each other, with the leader, right? Because now we understand what drives you, what motivates you. I see you differently, right? And I have that connection, even though that's not what drives me necessarily. I have that connection with you where I know what motivates you, and I can understand you better.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I wrote why down in big letters on my notes because I wanted to talk about that. And the first part of your book is about, we have to figure ourselves out first before we can do anything else. And I think the why statement, and many of us have read Simon Sinek, and we know, you have to have why statements. But of course, the problem is our personal why statement becomes our business why statement. And, and we forget that we're people, and so we don't have our own why statement. So I love that you say we have to figure that out, redefine it. And of course, those things change. I mean, your why statement in your 20s is very different than your why statement in your 60s, and at all points in between. So it's so important to have figured yourself out, at least for that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the first step that we do. So when we're working with an individual leader, working with a team, or working at the company level, we always start with why, right? So at that individual level, and I think there's a lot of confusion about what your why is. Like some people will say, oh, my why is my family, or my why is my faith, or my why is I want to change the world. And we call those your who's and your what's. That's not necessarily what drives you, right? So what drives you is what really intrinsically motivates you. So for me,
I was about to say, so Sonya, what is your why statement?
Yeah. So for me, I believe success happens when I partner with others to make a bigger impact. And how I do that is finding better ways of doing things and sharing them. And ultimately, what others can expect is simple solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So my why is to contribute, right? I want to have an impact. I want to contribute to
Right.
a bigger cause.
Mm-hmm.
People in my line of work, that's pretty common, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how I do that is I'm always looking for better ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm never going to be satisfied. There's always going to be something better. And then my what is to simplify, right? So looking for how can we make it simpler for people to get and understand.
Right.
You mentioned my book is very short. Yes, it's very simple to go through. It's deep. You get a lot of great nuggets there, but it's very simple in how you do that. And I use that in not only how I talk about me, but also how I talk about our company culture, because I'm the founder, right? So my why connection impacts the culture of our organization. What does that is I'm always looking for how can we make a bigger impact for our clients. I'm always changing things. So even in interviews, I tell them this, this is my why. What that means for you is that because my how is finding better ways, I'm never satisfied. And that might feel like criticism. And it's not, right? It's not, it's like that. I will do my best to acknowledge great work, but we're never going to rest on our laurels. That's not who we are as a company, because that's not who I am, right? And then I say, and if you're looking for something that is like really stable and doesn't change a lot, this isn't the company for you, and that's okay, right? And so it really helps people, in an interview process to know, am I the kind of boss that they want to work with? Right. Is this the kind of company that they want to join? And it's great if they don't, right? Let's get
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
why mess around?
Yeah. And so being able to have not only that self-awareness, but also being able to articulate it and share it with people can make a big difference. Right. So, so my husband, it also happens to impact your personal life as well. So my husband used to always tell me, oh, you never like my ideas. Right. And before I went through this process, I was like, I don't know why you say that. That's not true. Right. And what I realized is, I take his idea and in my head, think about how to make it better, and then say how I think I can make it better without actually acknowledging his idea first. Right. And then when I was like, oh, that's why he thinks I don't like his idea, because I'm not actually saying, because it's how I internally process, not actually saying, oh, that's a great idea. And what if we also, right? Right. So these little things can just the way we operate with our eye, we don't realize it because that's what drives us and how we operate, but can be misinterpreted by other people because they don't understand us. But once they understand, they're like, oh, okay, she's always trying to make it better. That's what this is about. Right.
And your why statement can be pretty self-serving. I mean, that's the thing is, I think, we get caught up in we have to be, again, thinking about the greater good, the greater company. Sometimes somebody's why statement is, I just want to last for 6 months until I can get to retirement. And that's okay, because then that's going to show you what's important to them, how to motivate them. I mean, all sorts of things. And of course, the really important thing about the why statement is it is I, not we.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I would say even that 6 months to retirement is a what, right? It's so, but there are, people that have a why of doing things the right way. Like they believe success happens when they create predictable systems and processes that can be used over and over. Then, or it might be the opposite, right? They want to challenge the status quo and be innovative, right? And that's what motivates them. That's what drives them. And we had a team where we did this process with them individually, and then we create one as a team. And when I looked at the directory of the whole team and what their why connection was, the CFO had a why of challenge. I was like, that might not be the best role
I know, for a CFO, they want challenging.
Right. Like to always be challenging the status quo. Finance is kind of rigid in structure.
Right. 2 and 2 make 4.
And we were able to have the conversation, like, is this the right role for you? And it was actually, he was not fulfilled by it. And we were able to make some changes in the organization to get him in a role where he could really use his superpower and get somebody who was more motivated by those predictable systems and processes to be in the role that he was in. So he would never have known that. And the company would never have known that without going through that process.
And he probably would have left. I mean, that's the thing, is at some point he would have said, this is not making me want to be at work every single day. And they would have lost a good employee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's, and it comes back to communication and just being open and honest with people. I remember I was working with somebody one time on her LinkedIn profile, and she figured she needed to leave. I mean, that was what she was doing. She was updating her LinkedIn profile so that then she could go out and find another job. And she'd been with the company for a long time and loved it, loved the people, all of those things, but was not fulfilled. And so it was so funny because she calls me and she says, "You're not going to believe this. My manager saw my LinkedIn profile." I thought, oh, she's been fired, right? And bless her manager, who said, "Why don't you want to?" Because she had put in there, "I want to do blah, blah, blah." And he said, "Why don't you want to do that here? You can." And she was just, it had never occurred to her because she'd never articulated it, all of these various things. But she saw her job at that company as in this little box. It never occurred to her she could change boxes. But yeah, like I said, bless that manager, because many people would have said shoo. Right. But yeah, they said, hey, you can stay here and still have your same parking spot, and all your benefits. I mean, all those various things. But it's back to that good old communication thing and being authentic. I mean, there are times where we don't say this is not working, because we do want to keep our job, right? But, there are definitely times too where you can say, hey, what if, and just voice that and just see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think leaders have that opportunity as well. People don't know what they want, right? And to be able to have that conversation, where do you see yourself going? Like, assume they're not going to be in this role for the rest of their life, right? And to say, where do you see yourself going? And it might not be in the same department, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, and allowing for that to say, are there other areas of the company that you're interested in? Can we start to help? If they say yes, can we start to help you by networking in those areas and making introductions, so you start to learn about what they're doing, work on special projects with them, right? And that's how you keep people, right? Is you're talking about what is their vision for themselves. If they don't know, help them start to articulate it and start to figure it out. Sometimes they think that it's not even possible to think that there are other opportunities, like you were saying in that example, when they could very well have another opportunity. This person that I was talking about was this. Oh, they created a whole new job for him that didn't exist before.
Oh, I love it.
And it was like, oh, we actually don't have somebody who's thinking outside the box in innovation and strategy. Let's create that role and put you there, and now he can really help grow the company. Right? So never would have thought of that without saying, where he was fulfilled. But managers can also do that, right? To say, what is it that you're interested in? Where do you see yourself going? What intrigues you? What are you curious about? If they don't have a full baked vision of where they want to go in their career, to say, well, what interests you, and how can we get you more exposure to that, and develop you, because it's going to help everyone for you to connect with, right?
Yeah, I've seen companies that are criticized when they have like good education and training programs. And the criticism is, well, aren't you training them to go somewhere else? Well, maybe, but you might also be training them to stay and do much better for you. And again, be fulfilled, be able to contribute more, all of those things. And if they do go somewhere else, we'll wish them well. That's the thing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen, we used to have this happen at Disney all the time, where people would leave and they take it, maybe there wasn't an opportunity for promotion within the company. And so they would go to another company to take that promotion, and then they would come back. Right. And, might be 3 or 4 years later, but they would come back, and you never know what can happen when somebody leaves, creating that relationship to want to refer other people to come work for you, but also to maybe potentially come back someday if they're a great performer.
Right. Yeah. I always find it interesting when somebody not only burns the bridge, but, they plow it under and do all sorts of things. And then they wonder, why are things going, not going well? Same company that I worked for. I had this employee who, unfortunately, we had to do layoffs. She was the last one hired, so she was the first one to go. I mean, that was essentially what it was. And until the day she left, she was a perfect employee. And then she burned that bridge. I mean, it was bad. But then the really funny thing was, I got the phone calls asking for, the referral phone calls. And I was like, and so I did the corporate speak,
Right.
She started on this date, she ended on this date, and her final salary was bleh. And then they would always say, seems like you're leaving something out. Right. and even just the tone of voice that I used, right? Because it's one thing to say, you know what, I'm sorry, it is our company policy that, we can only say this. But, and so she, of course, knew. And so I get the phone call from her. And she said, I don't understand. I thought you liked me. I said, funny thing, I thought you liked me too. And she and I actually had a really good chat. And then I was more than happy to give her a good referral. And because to me it was a learning lesson for her. But what I did was, I would say to folks, I have a cell phone. Maybe you would like to communicate with me on that. And then I was more than happy to, because she really had been a good employee. But yeah, you never know. And you also never know, especially in this day and age, who is connected to whom, right? You might think it's okay to just trash that company, and then you discover the next place you're applying for, they know those people and they heard about you, and there's no way they're going to hire you.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And back to your book, again, you're an executive, but are you a leader? And I think that really is so true. We're thrown into these positions either, because we create them ourselves, we start our own business, things like that, or we get promoted. And we really don't have any idea, in many cases, what it takes to be that leader. And, like I said, it's short. Each chapter is a page, folks. This is really easy. And then there's an example, so you can go through and go, oh yeah. But you talk about having that shared vision also, and communicating it to people. We're not psychic. We don't know these things. So how do we kind of build that one vision, one message type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you refer the title. I created it to be a little provocative, because I think a lot of executives lean on their title and create, like, I'm the boss, therefore you must do what I say, right? And it creates, and they will, but it creates a culture of compliance
and fear.
Right. Rather than passion, right? So connecting to, so then I often get asked, well, then what's a leader? Well, a leader is somebody who inspires people to follow them, right?
Right. And sometimes the leader is not the boss. That's always interesting.
Absolutely. Very often. And I love those people, right? But it's, in order to have them follow you, you have to know where you're going. right? So that connects to the vision. And I think so many organizations, I don't know, I don't know why, whether it's consulting companies, it's Google, whatever it is, that people come up with these vision statements.
And then they put them on the wall, right?
Right. But often they don't mean anything, right?
They're very pithy.
Right. Or even to say, we want to be the best in our industry. Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, or so, I mean,
right.
Or, my next thought is, well, who doesn't? I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly. And so really crafting a vision that is going to have people want to follow you into that destination. And I often tell clients, it's called vision for a reason. You need to see it, right? You need to be able to say, what does that world look like when we're there? What's happening? What are people saying? How will we know we're there? Right. And to be able to articulate it in a way that people want to make that happen, right? Saying that we want to be the best in our industry, for example, that might be good for the business owner. That might be good for the shareholders, depending on the size of the company, right? How's that going to get, the lowest level employee in your team excited about making that happen? How do they see what they're doing, connecting to making that happen, right? It's really drawing that picture and really having everybody feel like not only do they understand this is the purpose of the company, this is why we exist, and this is where we're going with that in our vision.
Right.
This is why it's exciting, right? So that's creating the passion for the organization. But here's what you specifically are doing to contribute to that. And so that they see, oh, without me, that doesn't happen. Right? Now I'm engaged. Now I what I do matters. Now I want to help. Right. And so that's the importance of having that shared vision and having be rallied behind it, so that you have all of these musical instruments, but it's playing one piece of music, in the orchestra in harmony.
Right. And it is so important that you do live it. I mean, how many times do we know what a company's vision is and how they actually function is complete opposite? They might say to provide the best customer service in the world, and that they provide a horrible customer service, or all these various things, and it's okay again for those things to change. That's why they shouldn't be written in stone on the wall, behind somebody. But and I think we saw that with COVID. I think companies really did go, ooh, we've been going down this path, and now maybe sometimes they were forced, we're going to go down this path instead, but and I think that comes back to, to me, an organization is a living, breathing entity. And so it changes, so your mission and your vision and all of those things change, just like your employees, your products, your services, those change also.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to respond to the environment and what is needed from the people that you serve, whether that's through a product or service. Maybe what they need changes, right? Or maybe there's a disruptor that's come in and in a competitor that you need to address that as well. So you're going to pivot. So what's going to be our differentiator? And so it's really connecting the dots all the way down the road, right? So when we start with purpose, that becomes the core. Then we look at plan, which is that vision, but not just the vision. So from the vision comes the strategy. So this is our destination. Our strategy is how are we going to get there? Where are we going to?
You got to make money. I mean, you can't get so caught up in the other that you don't make money.
Right. And then connected to that is what are our goals? What do we need to make sure get done now to take us in the direction of our vision? And I think sometimes companies create this lofty vision, but they don't take it down to the next. They're going to totally separate business strategy.
Right.
It has nothing to do with their vision. Right. And if that's the case, then that's not the right vision. Right. They need to be connected. then each individual person has their own goals that are, they can see directly. My goals connect to the company goals, connect to the strategy, connect to the vision. I can see the through line all the way through.
Right. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Sonya, we have to continue this conversation some other time because I think it's so important. And maybe we want people to be thinking about this right now for New Year's resolutions, right? Look at your own company, your department, your family. I mean, all of these things and figure this out. Are you on the right path? If not, what do you need to do to change it? And so that I think is so important. But until we talk again, if somebody wants to, we've talked about your book. You're an executive, but are you a leader? Of course, we will have a link to it in the show notes. But how do people find you, and how do they connect with you? And then what are the services that you provide?
Yeah, so we work at 3 different levels. We work at the individual leader. We work with teams, and then we work at the company-wide level.
Okay.
We call it Red Thread Leadership, where we take the purpose of the company, starting with why, and then we run that through everything they do at each of those levels, right? So to make sure that they have that passion at the end, right? And so if people want to learn more, the best place to go is our website. It's our one-stop shop for everything. So if you want to learn about your why, you can find out how to do that. If you want to learn more about our services, you could do that. You want to connect with me, all the social media links are on our website, and that's at executiveleader.com. Also have access to the books, and we have a ton of free resources from webinars and online trainings, articles, all kinds of things that you can do to increase your leadership and connect your business strategy and your culture to create faster growth.
And I'm going to put forth a premise here that we can all be leaders. Doesn't matter if you have that title or that position. And just think, if we all were leaders, I live in Atlanta, and last week we had the memorial service for Rosalind Carter. And I think that was one of the things that really struck me, was that she, one of her big premises is, how can you lead? And, and I think that was just, that really was, and then more importantly, and how can I help you? I think, and so if we all keep that in mind, how can you lead and how can I help you? Just think what we could do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
I know. Such fun. Well, Sonya, we do have just a couple minutes left. I do look forward to having you on again. I think this is a great conversation to have. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I think it all starts with your core. So what is your purpose? Whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're a leader, whether you have your own company, whether you are an executive in a company, what is your purpose? What is your team's purpose? What is your company's purpose? And how can you connect that to what fulfills you in life and also makes you money, both, right?
I love it, because we need money. We do. And it's okay to say we need money. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such a fun discussion with Sonya Shelton, sorry about that, the CEO of Executive Leadership Consulting. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.